Let us turn to a story that I have no doubt will go down extremely well in parts of, particularly in many cities where you're listening to us now. Ministers will allow councils to create further 20-mile-an-hour zones and low-traffic neighbourhoods. According to Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, saying local authorities would have her absolute support to introduce the schemes, which have, the Times reports, often prompted local opposition in towns and cities. She pledged to scrap plans by the previous government that would have made bringing in new schemes harder. This is what she told the Streets Ahead podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. That is entirely up for local areas to decide. And, it was completely wrong for the previous government to say that they would dictate that from Whitehall. There's no way me sitting in my office in the DFT can say, this road in Chester should be a 20 mile per hour road or not. It's completely ridiculous. Yeah. So if they want to do that, then that's got my full
okay.
backing.
The Transport Secretary Louise Haigh. Last year, Mark Harper, the former Conservative Transport Secretary, ended all central government funding for low-traffic neighbourhood projects. Louise Haigh's comments suggest Labour will reverse that position. She said that schemes needed to have community support, however. Do they? Around where you live, if you've got a 20-mile-an-hour scheme or a low-traffic neighbourhood, a street blocked off by a load of plants or whatever, that scheme's been agreed to locally, enjoys full support. Do we need more of these schemes? John Burke is a former Hackney Transport Chief responsible for introducing low-traffic neighbourhoods, now an advisor to local authorities on decarbonisation. Thanks for coming on, John. This must be music to your ears, I'd have thought.
Well, it's thanks for having me on the show, firstly. And I think if it's music to my ears in any way, it's not specifically about the willingness of the new Transport Secretary to allow councils to deliver 20-mile-an-hour zones in low-traffic neighbourhoods where they're demanded by local residents. But, from the perspective of democracy, local authorities are overwhelmingly the highways authorities for the vast majority of roads in this country. They're elected by local people. And I think Louise Haigh recognises the importance of allowing local elected councillors to make those decisions on behalf of the residents who've elected them. If residents don't want 20-mile-an-hour zones, if they don't want low-traffic neighbourhoods, then they won't demand them and they'll eject the councillors who deliver them locally. That hasn't been the case, and I'm confident that this will lead to the delivery of more 20-mile-an-hour zones and more low-traffic neighbourhoods across the country.
Is that fundamentally what's happened in Wales? The introduction of blanket 20-mile-an-hour zones was met with quite a lot of public backlash.
Well, I think that the perception of public backlash, I think, was overplayed by a media, frankly, that is opposed to the delivery of these necessary changes to the way our transport network operates. I think what we found, firstly, what we've seen in Wales is that there hasn't been a reversal of the 20-mile-an-hour blanket imposition of these zones, which was never blanket in any case. What councils are now be allowed to do is to look at roads on the strategic main road network where they think it may be necessary to increase it to 30 miles an hour. But this will be a perishingly small number of roads, because in Wales, the delivery of the 20-mile-an-hour limit has been a fantastic success in reducing road injuries and improving air quality and reducing noise pollution and reducing the costs associated with dangerous driving. So I anticipate there'll be very few councils in Wales that actually reverse many of the decisions that they've taken to introduce 20-mile-an-hour limits on their roads.
And the low-traffic neighbourhood schemes, about which we've heard quite a lot, and indeed we've heard from some emergency service vehicle drivers who say we're not really able to get through when these LTNs are in place, not least because the main roads are so chocker full of cars that would otherwise be using those back streets. It makes our job very difficult.
Yeah, but again, the evidence doesn't point to any of that, and the consistent evidence delivered by the Western Director of Travel, you're absolutely wrong. And in fact, what we can say
hang on, it's hard to argue with the experience of a paramedic driving an ambulance saying, I actually find it tougher to get through the traffic now, isn't it? Or
individual anecdotes are not evidence, and the evidence from Hackney, where I delivered the largest number of low-traffic neighbourhoods in the country through open modal filters that allowed emergency services to pass through them. They're operated under automatic number plate recognition software. The evidence is very clear that attendance times for the various categories of emergency services responses actually improved once we delivered what are effectively emergency services priority zones, right? So there are different ways you can operate low traffic neighbourhoods. You can deliver bollards. I think in the long run they work really well. We've got 50-year-old low traffic neighbourhoods in Hackney, such as the Beauvoir, which have never caused any problems for emergency services. Or you can deliver new ones which are open and operated under automatic number plate recognition software, and they prevent absolutely no hindrance whatsoever to emergency services passing through. And the overwhelming majority of new LTNs in the UK are operated under open modal filters that allow those emergency services vehicles to pass through. There will always be isolated instances, of course, where LTNs are delivered that, unanticipated consequences may arrive. And I think that a responsive and responsible council will respond to those things and make adjustments where necessary. But if the evidence for emergency services and or other, say, important commercial services deliveries were, was overwhelming in terms of the obstructions that these create, we would see that evidence, and that evidence has not been forthcoming.
Okay.
A lot of those arguments are based on anecdote that isn't supported by the wider set of data. And the London Ambulance Service itself has been consistently clear that the LTNs have not caused any form of significant delay to emergency service vehicles in London.
I take your evidence and I take it on face value, John, and we look at the overall trends and what have you, but there are also people who say that their experience is rather different. Thank you very much, Steve, for coming on. John Burke, former Hackney Transport Chief responsible for introducing a lot of LTNs, now advisor to local authorities on decarbonisation. Listening to that at 9:10 is Ascenda Maxton Graham, author and journalist who writes for, amongst others, The Spectator, Telegraph and Daily Mail. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. This is going to be given the go-ahead then for lots of councils to make that decision, democratically elected, and if there isn't opposition, people like it. What's the problem, Ascenda?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I think that probably 50-50 people like it and hate it. For me, the verb should not be deliver. The verb should be inflict. We're being criminalised. Ordinary people trying to get from one borough to another in London, if you don't happen to live in that borough, so they can't use the LTNs, neighbourhood, find themselves stuck on a. I live very near one of these arterial roads where there's an all-day traffic jam with mothers trying to get their children off to school and things, just stuck on these awful roads. So what worries me is that just innocent, law-abiding people are very, very likely to be criminalised, as it were, and given a hefty fine, and bailiffs are now coming to doors just for making an innocent mistake, not reading one of those strange round signs that says no cars down this little lane. I mean, you're just in too much of a hurry to read that. I mean.
Well, it's not an excuse, is it? It's an explanation, but it's not. If there's, you've got to follow the rules of the road, otherwise you're going to get pinged for it.
Yes, but apparently people say if you drive into Liverpool, any stranger driving to Liverpool or Manchester these days, you're highly likely to inadvertently break one of these rules.
Well, if it's not signposted, that's their fault, and they need to do something about it, and that's unfair. Yeah. But if it is, you've got to look around.
You have to be ultra fit at reading every minute sign.
You should be on the road if you can't read road signs. If you can't see the red light at the traffic light, what are you going to do? You're going to stop?
I suppose that's true, but I mean, the number of people I know who just have been got for going at 24 miles an hour or turning just into a little side street with just to check the map and realising that they've done something wrong. It just makes it a surveillance society that is not a happy place to be. And the idea that this whole country is going to become a network of rules and roads you're not allowed to go down. What are roads for if not to go get from A to B? It absolutely strangles residential areas and makes these sort of eerie enclaves of silence, which are actually apparently quite dangerous for people to walk down in the evening because there's no traffic on them and they're absolutely
Hang on, it's silent. More dangerous for people to walk down those roads in the evening because there's no traffic on them than if there is traffic on them.
Yes, exactly, because they can get assaulted because there aren't enough people around. So exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree.
Is that evidence, or is that just anecdote?
Yes. Oh, I mean, in Fulham, this has happened that taxis refuse to drop people off in their actual road because they're terrified of going down these LTNs. Not allowed to go down.
You're less likely to be seriously injured in a car accident if the car is going at 20 or rather than 30 miles an hour.
Well, that's true, and it can make sense in a residential area, of course, or very near a school. But when you have to go down a dual carriageway at 20 miles an hour, which that does happen in London and other parts of the country, crawling at a ridiculously slow pace, makes no sense at all. And I can't believe that's going to make any difference.
If a local authority...
if we went at 10 miles an hour, it'd be even safer. I just feel it's the Fennel West, it'll be 10 miles, it'll be 19 miles an hour and then 15. And it's a money-making theme. They're raking in our fines.
If local authorities are democratically elected, as they are, and they have the backing of people who the majority of whom do not dissent to the idea of a 20-mile-an-hour zone or an LTN. That's okay, isn't it?
Well, I suppose we can vote out these councils, and you're right. It is rather amazing how people don't.